Harry Steveson, folks, is the next one for Pipers'Persuasion. And we welcome you, Harry, to Pipers'Persuasion today. Thanks very much for taking part in the programme. And we're going to discuss, amongst other things, this special project that we're involved in with the 70s Tribute. The medley this year we'll be discussing the Shots one. But before we move on to that in a minute or two, could you just tell, for the folks watching all over the world, Harry, what did you do in your earlier life? Where you work at? You stayed. Did you always stay in the Belfast area? Or what's the story?
Well, I was born in Belfast, on the east side of the city, in 1945. When I was about 10-year-old, we moved out to the outskirts. It was a country area where my dad had actually been born. We lived actually for 4 years just in the wee farm cottage where my dad had been born. And that's where I started to learn to play pipes.
Okay.
It was just around about my 12th birthday. My father handed me a practice chanter and a Logan's tutor, and away we went. Then my dad at that stage played in the East Belfast pipe band. He was pipe sergeant.
He was a good player.
He was an extremely good player and a very thorough teacher.
Okay.
And but he wouldn't play in solos. I asked him one time, "Why don't you play?" And he said, "No." He says, "I haven't the nerve for it." And one or two of the top players here at the time, back in the 50s, actually pleaded with them to play. He just wouldn't. Anyway, eventually we moved. We moved into more modern housing in Dundonald. My dad had decided to retire from East Belfast, and he wanted me to join the Robert Armstrong Memorial. So I joined the Armstrong. I would have been about 14. And so that was fine. I came into the Armstrong, I think it was the winter of 1959. About 1961, well, Tommy Geddes was the pipe major. Jack McClintock, Jack was the pipe sergeant. And Jack, you probably wouldn't know, Jack was closely related to the McAllister family in Shots. Tom McAllister Sr. was Jack's uncle. And Jack had decided to retire. And one night, it was after the annual general meeting, when Jack stood down. Tommy said to me, he said, "Don't be going for the bus." He says, "I'll run you home." And ran me out home. Come into the house, Mum and Dad were just sitting by the fire. And he said to my dad was Harry as well as me. He says, "Harry, as you know, Jack McClintock's retired from the band." He says, "Would you come in as pipe sergeant?" And my father just said, "Right, okay." So my dad was in as pipe sergeant through to, I think, 1968. Yeah, 68, I think, was the last. That year we were second in grade 2 at Grangemouth. BP Grangemouth beat us, with apparently a number of ex-Muirhead papers in the ranks. No, that was sort of my early piping days. Work-wise, I trained in accountancy for 26 years, roughly. I worked for one of the Guinness companies here. And then the Guinness were moving the finance departments to Dublin. So we got very, very favourable severance deals. And I worked on, I was 56 when I came away from Guinness. I was able to work on for another 11 years through a couple of firms. And I eventually retired at 67.